Tanshe Kioao, Valerie McLeod, Dishinakashin. I'm running for Eastern Region 3 Regional Representative. Maybe you're seeing this today on Friday, May 23rd, or it could be Election Day, Saturday, May 24th, and you're seeing this and you have from 9 a.m. till 8 p.m. tonight to get your vote in. So if you need help finding where your polling station is, or you need a ride to the polling station, just let me know. I'll make sure there's contact info for you for those things in the details under this video. So I want to just quickly speak to one of the 6 points of my campaign platform. This video is about the Constitution. This is the C in my CIRNAC acronym. I've sort of stolen this from the government department, which is Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada. This is the federal department that essentially should really be working for us, but in some ways has had what I would say is inappropriate influence and even interference in the last 8 years in our MNS institution or government, whatever you would like to call it. That's up to you, but whatever we're doing here, it's very important that we have respect for our Constitution and that we uphold it. And there's a couple pieces to this. One is that in our Constitution, we have 4 members of our executive. So that's the president, the vice president, the treasurer, and the secretary. Now, we haven't had a treasurer in 8 years. And unfortunately, that's because the former treasurer from 2017 who was elected, Marianne Morin, the CEO of the MNS, Richard Quintal, had said that she resigned. He even sent a press release out saying she resigned. She said she did not resign, but she could no longer get access to the building. So she took him and the MNS to court, and she won. By 2020, there was a ruling, and it said Marianne Morin is still the treasurer of the MNS. Unfortunately, Richard Quintal, the CEO, and the MNS did not reinstate Marianne, and we didn't have a treasurer then for that entire cycle of 4 years there. So next in 2021, Robert LaFontaine ran and was elected by our people democratically to be the new treasurer. He was denied access to the building, and he also couldn't see our financial books. So he said, well, I will resign because I don't want to collect a salary, where I'm not able to do the job I was elected to do. So again, we had no treasurer, and another piece of our Constitution and legislation, our Elections Act, says the MNLA shall, that's a legal term that means it's imperative, they must, it's very important, has to happen. They shall appoint a new treasurer or have a by-election. So again, our chief electoral officer, Gwen LaFond, who's the same person who's overseeing this election, she didn't enforce our Elections Act. And I spoke to her about this in 2022, and I said, this is your job, this is your role, this is, you must make our local presidents, the Legislative Assembly, aware that this is their duty according to our legislation. And that never happened, There was never any kind of conversation or announcement or anything at any MNLA informing them that they have to do this. And so at one point, there was a name put forward by the PMC where they had suggested one of the regional representatives be the new treasurer, and the MNLA said, no, that's, there could be a conflict created there, where, you have someone in 2 roles, where you have a treasurer who has access to financials and then they're a region representative. That, could open up the door for, a lack of internal controls, could create suspicion or conflict, even if nothing happened. It doesn't It's not a good way to proceed. I think the MNLA was right in doing that, but they didn't realize that, the choice doesn't actually come from the PMC, who the new treasurer will be. The MNLA gets to appoint the new treasurer. Again, no conversation. Nothing was ever said to them. No directive from our electoral officer. Nothing. And so nothing happened. There was no by-election. They were told by the vice president if they had a by-election. Michelle Leclerc told them that would take money away from the sick and the elderly. And that's a lie, because there's $250 million in funding last year. Richard Quintal has acknowledged in front of the Legislative Assembly that $243 million of that comes from the government for programming in restricted funds. So it's already benchmarked for what it's going to be for. There would be no dipping into those pots. We're not even allowed. We don't set those amounts. The federal government does. There would be no dipping into the pot to take away from the sick or the elderly for election costs. That can't happen. So I don't know why she said that, other than to try to discourage our MNLA from calling a by-election. So the $7 million remaining is the only money that our PMC, our Provincial Métis Council, actually controls and has any wiggle room, as Richard Quintal had said. And they were misled that they couldn't, call a by-election and draw from that fund to do it. And unfortunately, they were discouraged by another member of the executive. So now it's been 8 years that we haven't had a treasurer, and I'm sure it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why that's an issue. That's a big issue, especially when we have a 4-member executive and one of them's missing for 8 years. We don't have one of our own people, democratically elected people, watching our own finances and what's going on. And there has been a lot of money coming through. Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, while we didn't even have a treasurer. So I'm sure you can understand why that's alarming. I think one other point with our Constitution is, there's supposed to be an AGA. Every single year, there's supposed to be an annual general meeting with our membership. And that's so that our citizens can get together. They can see these financial statements. It's up to them to ratify them. There's supposed to be a vote to ratify it. And we can ask questions. We can have our elected officials there in front of us at the end of each year, and we get to ask questions, and we get to find out what's going on and get clarification, and we get to sit and meet with each other and speak to each other and have that, this is a members or citizens organization. This belongs to us. The fact that this hasn't happened also in 8 years, also since the arrival of Richard Quintal, the CEO, who came to us from Indigenous Affairs, I think it's very alarming. And I understand that not everyone is able to keep up with all the politics all the time, and maybe just election time kind of allows for tuning into some of that for some people. But if we as citizens aren't at least paying attention enough to make sure there's a baseline there of our Constitution being followed, and if it doesn't get followed for 8 years and we don't say anything and nothing happens and there's no uproar, well, outside influences might come in and take over and start manipulating our institution or our government for their own agenda because we're not paying attention. And I hate to say it, but it looks like this is where we're at. So just please, please, please think about our Constitution, learn about it if you can, and pay attention in this election cycle when a treasurer gets elected. Let's make sure that they get to take that role, take that office, open those books. Let's make sure. Let's back up our elected officials and make sure they're getting to do what they're elected to do. Otherwise, we're just playing around here, We really have to take this seriously, at least at the baseline fundamental level. So that's my Constitution piece. Stick around for more videos to come on 5 more points of my platform, and please get out to vote. I'm Valerie McLeod. I'm running for Eastern Region 3 Regional Representative, and I would love nothing more than to have the opportunity to represent you and really, really get in there and fight for what's right, and you know, an institution or a government or an organization, an MNS that serves you.